I'm Audrey Ensor, Chief Editor of Medfield TV. In this tutorial, I'm going to cover the basics of editing text within Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm going to walk through two examples. The first will be creating a simple title screen, and the second will be a lower third. For my title screen, I'm starting in the editing layout. You can change layouts at the top of the window. I'm starting by creating my background, which will be a solid color. For your projects, you may want to use a photo or footage, but for this example, I'm going to keep it simple and start by adding a color matte. To do this, go down to the project panel in the bottom left. There's a new item icon in the bottom right of this panel. From that menu, select Color Matte. Make sure it's set to your sequence size, select your color, and name it appropriately so you can find it within your project bin. Locate the color matte and drag it into your timeline to create your background. To add text, use the Type tool found in the toolbar. I'm going to focus on my preferred place to edit text, but there are two. The first is in the Effect Controls tab found in the Source Monitor window. Make sure your text element is selected, then under Effects Controls, you will see a drop-down menu labeled Text. Expand this menu and you will get various text editing tools. The disadvantage I see in this method is that it excludes alignment tools. I find those particularly helpful when needing to center text on the screen. The second place to edit text is within the graphics layout. Make sure your text is selected on the timeline and it will appear under the Essential Graphics panel. Here you can make all your text edits. You can make adjustments to font, size, style, etc. I find the Align tools essential to my editing process. Use these to center or align your text or graphics in your projects. I don't recommend trying to center things by eyeballing it. For this example, I'm aligning my title screen to the center of my project, both horizontally and vertically. In some instances, you may only want to center align something horizontally, sometimes only vertically, depending on what else might be on screen with the text. It varies from project to project, but now you know where to find the Align tools and you can make use of them. And side note, the Align tools can be found in any Adobe editing program, not just Premiere. I'm now going to demonstrate adding a lower third for my second example to cover more essentials of creating text assets in Premiere. Here's a still of myself while filming Medfield TV's show, Updates. I'm going to start with the graphics layout already open. Again, to add text, you use the Type tool found in your toolbar. Lower thirds are text graphics that provide additional context to your video footage. A lot of the time, they're used to name the person appearing on screen and a short descriptor of who they are. So for this example, I'm going to add in my name and my job title. Lower thirds, as the title suggests, typically are placed in the lower portion of the screen on either side. A very helpful tool for placing text in Premiere is Safe Margins. In your Program Monitor window, there are icons along the bottom. There's one that is a rectangle within a rectangle. If you can't find it, there's also a plus symbol to the right where you can find extra tools. With the Safe Margins tool in effect, two rectangles will appear in your Program Monitor panel on your video. These are called safe margins because this is what is considered the safe spaces to place your text. Avoid placing text too close to the edge of the screen, because depending on what device it is being viewed on, it could potentially get cut off. I personally use the outermost rectangle as my absolutely do not cross line. I also use it to sit my lower thirds on. I've placed my lower third within the safe margins, but it's very large and doesn't have the right look or feel. Lower thirds typically aren't large and don't take up much of the screen. It should be a second factor to what you're looking at. What's going on in the video should still be the main focus. Think of it almost like a caption to a photo. You read it to know what's going on, but it's not the priority. Keep it small, but sizable enough that a viewer is able to read it clearly. Lower thirds are usually made with a hierarchy, where the name or key information is larger, bolder, or is just more noticeable than the descriptor below it. I'm going to make some adjustments to adhere to this and make it more professional looking. I'm going to turn off my safe margins to be able to see my text better since it's already in the right spot. So I've made changes to the font and size, but it still gets lost in the background. Depending on what is behind your text, this could work. But in this example, there's too much going on behind the text for it to be clearly read. One of the most important things to think about when adding text to your video is if it's legible. Can the viewer even tell what it says? A lot of factors go into this, including things like font choice and size. I already chose my font and size, so I'm going to play around with other tools to help me make my text more legible. In the Appearance section of the Essential Graphics panel, you'll find a few options to alter your text. Fill is the color of your text. Sometimes simply changing the color makes your text more legible. You can click the rectangle next to the word to select a new color. You can also use the eyedropper tool to select a color. This tool is very helpful if you want to match a certain color that appears in your video. Toggle the eyedropper on so it's blue, then hover over the part of your video you want to select the color from. Maybe I want to match the curtain color, so I'll hover over that and click. Changing the color of my text isn't working for this example. Let's try adding a stroke. A stroke is just an outline around your text. Check off the box next to stroke to apply it. Since my text is already white, this just makes it bolder, so I'll go in and change the color. To change the weight of the stroke, or how thick it is, the number to the right can be adjusted. You can click it and manually change the number, or you can click, hold, and drag to the right or left to increase or decrease the weight. With the plus icon, you can add another stroke. And you can remove it with the minus icon. The stroke I added somewhat helps with making the text more legible, but let's try out another option. You can add a background to just your text box. Check off the box next to background to apply it. Below will appear two sliders. The first changes the opacity, which is how solid or see-through it is. The second adjusts the size. Currently, there isn't any breathing room around the text. The box ends right where the text does. So if you're using the background option, make it a bit larger than the text itself. You can adjust the color the same way as I showed you how to change it before. There's also an option to add a shadow. Anytime you deselect the checkbox next to an effect, it disables it. I'm going to turn off the background to show the shadow effect alone. That does an alright job at separating the text from the background in this example. There are multiple options to play with the look of the shadow. The default color is gray, but I personally like to always switch it to black. You can also choose another color to give it more of a glow effect. The first slider under the shadow is opacity. This is where you can make the shadow more or less harsh. The next option below that is the angle of the shadow. You can mess around with what direction your shadow goes. I tend to stick with the default. The next slider is the distance your shadow is from your text. Depending on the style you're going for, this can vary, but I tend to keep it at the default because I usually use the shadow tool to make the text pop, and the default keeps it pretty close behind the text to get that desired result. The next slider is the size. This defaults to 0, but increasing it slightly can make your text a lot more legible. Again, depends on the look you're going for or what your background is. There's no set way you have to be doing this. I'm just demonstrating all the text editing effects available to you. The last slider is blur. Your shadow gets harsher if you bring it down, and gets more blown out if you bring it up. I think for this example, I'm going to do a background and a shadow on my text. It makes the text visible, and then the added shadow makes it pop even more. I want to show you the lower thirds we actually use for the show that this still is from. It's a newscast, so I created an animated lower third using After Effects. This tutorial was about editing text within Premiere, and now you know how you can do that. But if you really want to elevate your graphics, creating them in another program like After Effects or Photoshop is highly recommended. The same overarching lesson applies to those programs too. When making graphics, always be thinking about if they're easy to read for the viewer. Thanks for watching this tutorial on editing text within Premiere. Subscribe to Medfield TV and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more content.